The Morrow spindle was a monument to rust and reluctance. It hung in the black. A tangle of gantries and pressure domes spun around a central axis that had been groaning under the strain for 2 centuries. Outside the thick, perpetually grimy viewport of Ardenhale's workshop, the chorus rift glittered a river of shattered worlds and stellar dust, beautiful from a distance and lethal up close. It was a fitting backdrop for a place that existed on the edge of everything, the edge of known space, the edge of the fragile accord of lumen, the edge of solvency. Arden preferred it that way. Edges were quiet. He ran a diagnostic on the plasma injector of a freighter engine, his movements economical and precise. The metallic scent of ion discharge and hot filings was the only perfume he knew. It was honest. An engine either worked or it did not. It did not make promises it could not keep, did not sign treaties with its fingers crossed, did not trade children like political currency to maintain a peace that was really just a long, slow ceasefire. The Accord of Lumen. A grand name for a grand bargain struck between the human sphere and the myriad alien species after the Great Collapse. It was a peace built on fault lines, cemented by exchanging the sons and daughters of nobles as wards, and held together by the grim hand of the Concord Bureau of Stability, whose directives were always vague and always final. On stations like the Spindle, you could feel the weariness in the recycled air. People were tired of grand bargains. They just wanted a working atmospheric scrubber and a black market that did not ask for your life story. A chime echoed through his workshop, the tinny sound of the station-wide comm. "Hail!" A gravelly voice crackled. It was Jax, the dockmaster, a man whose body was more machine than meat and whose temperament was all grinding gears. "Got a job for you. Docking Bay 9. A real piece of junk this time. Came in hot." Arden wiped his hands on an already blackened rag. "What kind of junk, Jax?" "Life pod. Old model. Looks like it went through a gravel storm and lost. The seals are shot. Nav computer's a scrambled egg. Thing practically welded itself to the docking clamp." "Payment?" Arden asked, his voice flat. It was always the first question. His principle was simple. He did not sell his soul, but his time had a price. "Client is pending," Jax grunted. "Pod's astray. Salvage contract. Station takes its cut. You get the rest, but there's a complication." Arden waited. With Jax, there was always a complication. "There's a passenger," the dockmaster said, his voice dropping. "A kid." Arden felt a familiar, unwelcome tightening in his chest, a ghost of a memory he kept buried under layers of grease and circuitry. A child. He had once been part of a special rescue unit, a life spent pulling people from the wreckage of grand bargains gone wrong. His name, his entire history, had been scrubbed from every official record, a favor he had called in when he decided to become a ghost. "Is the kid okay?" "Seems to be scared. Won't come out. It's a Valkyrie." That gave Arden pause. The Valkyrie were a warrior race, bound by an intricate code of honor that most humans found baffling and terrifying. Their children were raised in creches, not coddled in life pods. A lone Valkyrie child was more than an anomaly. It was an impossibility. "I'm a mechanic, Jax, not a babysitter." "The kid won't let anyone near the pod's internal systems. You're the best mechanic on this rust bucket. Hale, you're also the quietest. Just get the door open and the system stable. We'll handle the rest." The comm clicked off. Arden sighed. The sound lost in the hum of the workshop. The rest? He knew what that meant. The Bureau would get involved. The child would become a pawn, a piece of leverage, another contract hostage to prop up the fragile peace. He hated it, but a job was a job, and a child was trapped in a broken machine. Docking Bay 9 was cold, the metallic tang of void-chilled steel sharp in the air. The life pod was a mess, a scarred metal teardrop scorched and pitted from re-entry. It was an old military model, tough but obsolete. Fused to one side was a plate bearing a seal, but it was so heavily damaged and smeared with some kind of resin that the sigil was illegible. Arden ran his fingers over the warped metal. He could feel the faint vibrations of a humming power source from within, struggling to stay alive. He tapped a sequence on the outer hatch. "This is Arden Hale," he said, his voice calm and even. "I'm a mechanic. I'm here to fix your ride. I'm not with the Bureau or station security." There was no response. He knelt, popping open his toolkit. He worked with a focused silence, his hands moving with an unthinking grace. He bypassed the magnetic lock, then started on the pressure seals. It was delicate work. One wrong move and he could rupture the internal atmosphere. As he worked, he spoke, his voice a low monotone. "Engines have a language. So do ships. They tell you where they hurt. This one's hurting all over. But the heart is still beating. That's the power core. Faint. But it's there. As long as the heart's beating, you can fix anything." He felt more than heard a slight shuffle from inside. "I'm not going to force the door," he continued, his eyes on the complex wiring before him. "That's not how you fix things. You listen, you understand the problem, and then you help. I'm just going to get the lights back on and make sure the air is good. Sound fair?" He finally uncoupled the last seal. With a soft hiss, the hatch swung inward an inch, stopping against an internal lock. Through the gap, he saw a pair of large, dark eyes staring back at him. They belonged to a child, no older than 8 standard years. Her skin had the faint, silvery sheen of the Valkyrie, and her hair was a shock of white, cut short in a severe, martial style. She was small for her age, huddled in the corner of the cramped pod, clutching a small, metallic object to her chest. "See," Arden said softly, "just a mechanic." He offered a small smile. The girl did not smile back, but the terror in her eyes lessened by a fraction. She watched him, her gaze unwavering, as he gently eased the hatch open. The interior was as battered as the outside. He slipped inside, the space barely large enough for the two of them. "My name is Arden," he said. The girl remained silent, her knuckles white where she gripped the object. He did not press her. He turned his attention to the control panel. It was a wreck, but as he had suspected, the primary power cell was intact, just disconnected. He began to work, his movements slow and deliberate, letting the child observe him, letting the quiet rhythm of his work be its own reassurance. He reconnected the power, and the pod's internal lights flickered to life, casting a warm, steady glow. The air recycler's word, the sound a gentle hum. "There now," he said, turning back to her. "A little better." She finally spoke, her voice a tiny whisper, the human standard tongue accented with the formal, clipped cadence of her people. "They are coming." "Who's coming?" "The silent ones?" Before he could ask what she meant, her stomach growled, a sound so mundane it was almost comical in the tense silence. Arden felt the corner of his mouth twitch. "Sounds like the engine's low on fuel. The station market has some of the best synth noodles this side of the rift. You like noodles?" She just stared at him, her expression unreadable. "Right," Arden said, standing up. "Noodles it is. Stay here. I'll be back." He left the pod, closing the hatch but not sealing it. He knew he would need a specific energy conduit to fully repair the navigation system, and Jax would not have one in stock. The black market in the low-gravity bazaar was his only bet, and the girl needed to eat. The bazaar on the Morrow Spindle was a chaotic, vibrant mess. It occupied a massive central dome where the station's artificial gravity was kept at a quarter standard, allowing for towering stacks of goods and easy transport of heavy cargo. Beings of a dozen species floated and drifted through the crowded space, their voices a constant babble of different languages. The air smelled of alien spices, hot metal, and desperation. It was a place where you could buy anything from a rare xenocrystal to a new identity. Arden had decided to bring the girl with him. Leaving her alone in the pod felt wrong, a risk he was not willing to take. She had not given him her name, so he had taken to simply calling her Kid. She floated just behind him, her hand gripping the back of his worn jacket, her wide eyes taking in the dizzying spectacle of the market. She still clutched the metallic object, a small, intricate data slate of some kind. "Stick close," he murmured, navigating through a crowd of burly, four-armed gorgons, haggling over a crate of what looked like writhing tentacles. "And don't touch anything." His destination was a small, cluttered stall run by a wizened old man named Silas, a human who had been on the spindle longer than the rust. Silas could procure anything if you had the credits. "Arden," Silas greeted him, his eyes crinkling. "Still fixing the unfixable. I see. What piece of forgotten tech do you need today? A flux capacitor for a time machine, a motivation chip for a lazy politician. Just a Series 4 energy conduit, Silas. And a bowl of your least questionable noodles." Silas chuckled. "The conduits are in the back. The noodles are always questionable. Part of their charm." He squinted at the small figure hiding behind Arden. "Got a new apprentice." "Just a passenger from a busted ship," Arden said, keeping his tone light. As Silas shuffled to the back of his stall, Arden felt a change in the atmosphere of the bazaar. It was subtle at first, a dip in the constant hum of conversation, a sudden stillness in the perpetual motion. He scanned the crowd. Several figures were moving through the market, their paths converging on his position. They were tall and lean, clad in dark, form-fitting armor that seemed to drink the light. They wore no insignia, but they moved with a chilling, synchronized purpose that spoke of elite training. Their faces were hidden by smooth, mirrored helms. The silent ones. The girl's grip on his jacket tightened until it was painful. Arden's instincts, honed by a past he had tried to forget, screamed. He pushed the girl behind him, his body shielding hers. "Silas!" he called out, his voice low but urgent. "We're leaving." But it was too late. The figures formed a loose circle around them. They did not draw blasters or pulse rifles. Instead, each one produced a long, curved blade from a sheath on their back. The swords were a dull, black ceramic, utterly non-reflective. Bioceramic. Arden realized with a sick lurch in his stomach. Designed to be undetectable by most scanners and to cause catastrophic biological trauma. One of the figures stepped forward, its mirrored helm reflecting a distorted image of Arden and the terrified child behind him. It raised a hand, palm open, a universal gesture for "hand it over." It was looking at the girl. Arden did not think. He did not weigh the odds. He did not consider the political ramifications of interfering. He saw a child, and he saw monsters coming for her. A simple, brutal equation. His body moved on its own, a deep, primal instinct taking over. He had once been a rescuer. He had sworn an oath, not to a government or a corporation, but to the simple idea that you did not let the innocent get ground up in the gears of someone else's war. "You'll have to go through me," he said, his voice a low growl. He had no weapon, only the heavy spanner he still had, clipped to his belt. The lead figure tilted its head, a gesture of mild curiosity. Then it lunged. The attack was impossibly fast. Arden shoved the girl backward, toward the relative safety of Silas's stall. He brought his spanner up to block, but the bioceramic blade sliced through the hardened steel as if it were soft plastic. The sword's tip bit deep into his shoulder. Pain, white-hot and blinding, erupted in his nerves. He grunted, stumbling back. But he did not fall. Another attacker moved in from the side, its blade a black blur. Arden twisted, trying to avoid the strike, but the sword raked across his ribs, tearing through his jacket and the flesh beneath. He was too slow. They were too fast. He was a mechanic, they were assassins. But he would not break. He would be a wall. He saw the girl's terrified face and felt a surge of adrenaline. He swung his broken spanner, a useless gesture, but it bought him a second. A third blade sank into his leg. A fourth pierced his side. Each blow was precise, aimed to incapacitate, to bleed him out. He kept his feet, planting them wide. He was a shield. He was the only thing between the girl and them. He could feel the warmth of his own blood starting to soak his clothes. The sounds of the bazaar had faded to a distant roar. His world had narrowed to this small circle of violence, to the flash of black blades and the searing agony of each new wound. They kept coming, their attacks relentless. 1, 2, 3 more strikes. He lost count. His vision started to tunnel. He could feel his strength failing. He was going to die here, in a low-gravity market, defending a child he did not know from an enemy he did not understand. He found a strange sense of peace in the thought. Some things were worth dying for. He had not sold his soul. He felt a final, crushing series of impacts. He counted them in a detached, hazy part of his mind. 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 18 stabs. An absurd number. He finally fell to his knees, his body a ruin. Through the red haze of his vision, he saw the lead attacker step past him, reaching for the girl, with the last of his strength. Arden lunged forward, not at the assassin, but at the child. He wrapped his arms around her, pulling her small body against his chest, turning his back to the enemy, making himself the final barrier. He braced for the killing blow. It never came. Instead, a new sound cut through the air, a deep, resonant clang, like a massive bell being struck. It was the sound of a Valkyrie honor glaive, striking another. Alarms began to blare throughout the station, a shrill, panicked cry. Arden collapsed onto his side, his arms still locked around the child. His blood, freed from the weak gravity, floated away from his body in perfect, crimson spheres, a ghastly constellation of his life drifting away. He could hear shouting, the clash of weapons. His vision was fading to black, but he saw one last thing. A group of towering figures had arrived. They were clad in the ornate, silver and blue armor of the Valkyrie wardens. They dispatched the black-clad assassins with brutal, contemptuous efficiency. Then, the lead warden, a tall woman with a fearsome, scarified face and eyes that burned with cold fire, turned. She looked not at the child Arden was protecting, but at him. Her gaze was one of utter shock, of disbelief, of something that looked like sacred awe. And then, she did the impossible. She knelt. The other Valkyrie wardens followed her lead, their armored forms dropping to one knee, their heads bowed. They knelt before him, before the broken, bleeding body of a human ship mechanic, as if he were a king, a god, a holy relic. It was the last thing Arden saw before the world dissolved into darkness. He woke to silence. Not the humming, mechanical silence of the station, but a deep, profound quiet that felt ancient and clean. He was lying on a soft surface, a medical biobed of some kind. The air was cool and smelled of sterile metal and a faint, unidentifiable incense. He opened his eyes. The room was circular, its walls a seamless, pearlescent white that seemed to glow with a soft, internal light. It was clearly Valkyrie design, elegant and severe. He sat up. There was no pain. None. He looked down at his body. His clothes were gone, replaced by a simple, gray tunic. He ran his hands over his chest, his side, his legs. There were no wounds, no scars, not even a hint of the 18 vicious cuts that should have ended his life. His skin was whole, unblemished. He felt better than he had in years. Stronger. Clearer. It was impossible. At the foot of the biobed, a team of 5 Valkyrie wardens was kneeling, their heads still bowed in that same gesture of profound reverence. The woman who had led them was in the center. Slowly, she lifted her head. Her face was etched with lines of duty and battle, but her eyes, when they met his, held a look of utter solemnity. "You are awake," she said, her voice a low, respectful contralto. Arden found his own voice, surprised by its steadiness. "Where am I? What happened?" "You are aboard the Valkyrie cruiser, Oathkeeper," the woman replied, "and you have fulfilled the rite of the wall." "The what?" Arden asked, confused. He swung his legs over the side of the bed, his feet finding the cool, smooth floor. "You took 18 blades meant for one of royal blood," she explained, her voice filled with a gravity that seemed to shake the very air. "You, a human, stood as a shield for a child of the Valkyrie line. Such a thing has not happened since the Age of Embers. Our laws, our most sacred traditions, are clear. You are no longer just Arden Hale. You are the shield-bearer." Arden stared at her, then at the other kneeling warriors. This had to be a dream, a hallucination brought on by blood loss. "Look, I appreciate the rescue, but you've got the wrong guy. I'm a mechanic. I fix ships. I am not a shield-bearer." The warden captain rose to her feet. She was even taller than he had realized, a warrior in her prime. "Our laws do not make mistakes. My name is Sarah Nix, captain of the Wardens of the Citadel. The child you protected is named Eerie. She is the last of the direct line of the Sun Throne." She gestured to a corner of the room. The little girl, Eerie, was there, sitting on a small stool. She was dressed in clean, simple robes, and she was watching him with those same large, dark eyes, no longer filled with terror, but with a quiet, watchful curiosity. "We were sent to retrieve her," Sarah Nix continued. "We arrived only to find you. We are bound by honor to you now. We are sworn to you." Arden shook his head, a humorless laugh escaping him. "No. No. Thank you. You can consider any debt paid. Just drop me back at the spindle. I'll forget the whole thing." He just wanted his quiet life back, the anonymity he had worked so hard to build. "That is not possible," Sarah said, her expression unyielding. "Eerie is not safe. The ones who attacked you are called the Null Choir. They hunt her for reasons we do not fully understand. She must be returned to our fortress, the Citadel in Void, and our laws state that only the shield-bearer can guarantee her passage." "And that's me?" Arden asked, the sarcasm dripping from his voice. "Because I was too stupid to get out of the way." "It is because you chose not to," Sarah corrected him, her voice softening slightly. "You chose to become the wall. Now, you are indispensable." Arden stood up, ready to argue, to demand they take him back. But as he moved, he caught his reflection in the polished surface of the wall. He stopped, his breath catching in his throat. His skin was not unblemished. Where the 18 wounds should have been, there were now patterns. Intricate, shimmering lines of gold and silver light swirled across his skin, tracing the paths of the blades. They were not scars. They were script, a complex, flowing calligraphy that seemed to move with a life of its own, pulsing with a faint, internal luminescence. He recognized the shapes, the forms. It was the ancient, high script of the Valkyrie, the language of their oldest rituals and deepest laws. It was tattooed, or somehow branded, onto his very flesh. He stared at his reflection, at the impossible writing that now adorned his human skin. He was just a man, a mechanic, a ghost who had left his past behind. But the glowing marks on his body told a different story. They were a claim, a binding, a mystery written into his soul. He looked from his reflection to the warrior captain and the kneeling wardens, and then to the small child who was the cause of it all. He was trapped. He was no longer just Arden Hale. He was something more, and he was terrified of what that might be. The silence in the medbay stretched, thin and fragile. Arden Hale stood before his own reflection, a stranger wearing his face. The golden script on his skin pulsed with a soft, rhythmic light, a language he could not read but felt in his bones. It was a map of his own near death, a declaration of a purpose he had never asked for. He was no longer a ghost. He was a landmark. "This is a mistake," he said, finally, tearing his eyes away from the impossible marks. He turned to face Sarah Nix. "Your laws, your rights, they're for you, for the Valkyrie. I am a human. These are just scars." "Scars do not glow, shield-bearer," Sarah replied, her voice unwavering. The other wardens remained kneeling, a silent, armored testament to the tradition that now held Arden captive. "And the right of the wall does not distinguish between species. It recognizes action. You acted. The right responded. It is done. Then undo it." The request was absurd, and he knew it. "I have my own life. It's quiet. I like it that way. Your quiet life ended when you chose to stand between a child of the royal line and 18 blades," Sarah stated, her gaze hard as forged steel. "The Null Choir will not stop hunting her. The Citadel in Void is her only sanctuary, and our sacred texts are clear. Her safety is now bound to your presence. You are her shield, literally and spiritually. Where she goes, you must go." Arden looked past the formidable captain to Eerie. The child was watching him, her expression a complex mixture of awe and hope. He saw the faint tremor in her hands. She was terrified, and somehow he had become her anchor. The memory of her small hand clutching his jacket in the bazaar, of her whispered words. "They are coming," echoed in his mind. He had tried to outrun responsibility for years, burying himself in the anonymous grease and grime of his workshop. But it had found him. He let out a long, slow breath, the air tasting of defeat and inevitability. "Fine," he said, the word feeling heavy and foreign on his tongue. "I will take her to your citadel. I will get her there safely. But once she is there, my part in this is over. You and we have an understanding. I am a delivery service, nothing more." Sarah Nix gave a stiff, formal nod. "Your terms are direct, for a human." A flicker of something, perhaps disdain, crossed her features before being suppressed. "We accept. We will depart the Morrow Spindle at once. Your belongings have been retrieved from your workshop." The walk from the medbay to the ship's bridge was a study in contrasts. The Oathkeeper was nothing like the cobbled-together, perpetually failing systems of the station. Its corridors were wide and clean, the bulkheads forged from a single, seamless alloy that absorbed sound, creating an atmosphere of disciplined calm. The air was crisp, perfectly balanced. It was a warship, but it felt more like a cathedral dedicated to the art of battle. The wardens walked with him, a silent honor guard, their heavy boots making no sound on the deck plates. Eerie stayed so close to Arden that her shoulder brushed against his leg with every other step. He did not acknowledge it, but he did not pull away either. The bridge was a dome of black, crystalline material that offered a panoramic view of the void. Stars burned with a fierce, unwavering clarity. At the center was a command throne, currently empty, surrounded by sunken crew pits, where Valkyrie officers worked with silent efficiency. "Impressive," Arden said, his gaze sweeping over the sophisticated consoles. "Does it come with a complimentary beverage service, or is that reserved for actual holy relics?" Sarah, who had taken her position near the main viewport, turned her head slightly. "The ship's nutrient dispensers are adequate, And we do not worship relics. Shield-bearer. We honor the oaths they represent. Right. Oaths, Arden muttered. He watched the Morrow spindle receding in the view, the familiar tangle of rust and lights shrinking, until it was just another piece of stellar debris against the glittering backdrop of the chorus rift. He felt a pang of loss for the simple, uncomplicated life he had just been forced to abandon. So, tell me about these oaths of yours. You have the right of the wall, which apparently gets you a full-body tattoo and a new job title. What else is in the Valkyrie Book of Fun? Our lives are bound by oath marks, she said, her tone that of a lecturer. They are ritual scars, willingly taken, that signify a vow. A warrior's first mark is for her clan. Her second is for her captain. The highest mark is one of service to the royal line. They are a physical record of our honor. So you're all walking resumes, Arden surmised. What happens if someone breaks an oath? They do not, Sarah said simply, as if the concept were unthinkable. An oath mark is a part of our soul. To break it would be to cease to exist in any meaningful way. She turned to face him fully. The marks you bear are different. They were not taken, but given. They are the physical manifestation of the right. It is a legend, a story told to our children. No one living has ever witnessed it. A protector who is not Valkyrie, who has no oath marks to bind him, chooses to shield the bloodline purely out of, what would you call it, a sense of rightness. Your actions have invoked one of our deepest beliefs, that true honor is not bound by race or creed, but by the willingness to sacrifice. Her words were meant to be profound, but Arden only felt the weight of their expectations. I was just trying to keep a kid from getting killed. It's not complicated. You don't need to write a symphony about it. Perhaps not, Sarah conceded, a sliver of ice in her voice. But you must understand the symphony is now playing, whether you wish to hear it or not. Suddenly, a violent shudder ran through the entire ship. A low, groaning sound of stressed metal filled the bridge, and the brilliant starfield outside warped, the lights smearing as if seen through flawed glass. Red alert klaxons blared, bathing the bridge in a pulsing, crimson light. "Report," Sarah snapped, instantly the warrior captain. "We've been pulled from Void Transit," a pilot called out from his station. "Some kind of interdiction field gravity trap. Massive and localized. Source: one vessel, closing fast. It's a mess. Captain: human design, heavily modified. Looks like a junk hauler fitted with pirate hardware. They're broadcasting a name, the Razor Hush." Arden moved to a secondary console, his mechanic's instincts kicking in. He pushed aside a junior officer who looked to Sarah for confirmation. She gave a curt nod. Arden's hands flew across the holographic interface, calling up engineering schematics and power distribution grids. The Valkyrie systems were elegant and advanced, but he recognized the underlying principles. "Your pilots are fighting the trap directly," he said, not looking up. "They're trying to overpower it with the main engines. It won't work. It's like trying to fight your way out of quicksand by thrashing." "We are Valkyrie," the pilot retorted, his voice tight with strain. "We do not run. We break through." "You'll break the ship before you break the field," Arden shot back. The deck groaned again, louder this time. "This isn't Valkyrie tech. It's a human gravity well projector, crude, but effective. It doesn't just pull you in. It hooks into your ship's own gravitational signature and turns it against you. The more you push, the harder it pulls." Sarah was watching him. Her eyes narrowed in suspicion. "You seem to know a great deal about pirate technology for a simple mechanic." "I've worked on a lot of ships," Arden said evasively. "You see things." He saw the problem clearly. The Razor Hush was a predator that knew its prey's weaknesses. The Valkyrie were powerful, but their tactics were direct, honorable. They would meet a threat head-on. The pirates were counting on it. "We need to stop fighting it. We need to trick it." Trick it, Sarah asked, her lip curling with distaste at the dishonorable notion. Your thruster array, Arden said, pointing at a schematic. The feedback controls are completely isolated from the main drive. You can manipulate the output without affecting primary propulsion. We're going to create a false gravity signature, a resonance echo. We'll make the projector think the ship is somewhere it isn't. The pilot looked at him as if he were insane. That is not what the thrusters are designed for. Overloading the feedback loop could shear them from the hull. It will if you do it wrong, Arden said. But if you modulate the power in a decaying harmonic sequence, you can create a ghost image. The projector will latch onto the echo, and for a split second, the real field will collapse. That's our window. He did not wait for permission. His fingers danced across the console, overriding the pilot's controls. He was not just inputting commands. He was feeling the ship's systems, listening to the strain on the power conduits, the vibration of the engines. It was a language he understood better than any spoken tongue. This was what he did. He found the breaking points and reinforced them. He found the flaws and exploited them. He had done this before, in situations far more desperate than this, in a life he had tried to erase. He fed power to the thrusters, not in a steady stream, but in a series of precise, oscillating bursts. The ship shuddered more violently, and a high-pitched whine began to build. "What are you doing?" Sarah demanded, her hand resting on the hilt of her ceremonial blade. "Conducting," Arden replied, his eyes locked on the fluctuating energy readings. "Now." He cut the power abruptly. For a terrifying moment, the ship seemed to fall, tumbling into the heart of the gravity well. Then, with a deafening bang that echoed through the hull, the interdiction field flickered and died. The ship was free. The starfield outside snapped back into sharp focus. "The enemy vessel is vulnerable," the pilot shouted, his voice a mix of shock and relief. "Destroy them," Sarah commanded, her voice like ice. The Oathkeeper's weapon systems fired, lances of pure energy slicing through the void. The pirate ship, caught completely by surprise, erupted in a silent, brilliant fireball. The bridge of the Valkyrie warship was quiet once more. The only sound the steady hum of a perfectly functioning engine. The wardens and bridge officers were all staring at Arden. They were looking at him, not as a holy relic, but as something far more dangerous, a man with a secret. Sarah Nix walked slowly toward him, her expression unreadable. "You said you were a mechanic." "I am," Arden replied, stepping back from the console and wiping his suddenly sweaty palms on his tunic. "I fix things. Your ship was about to be broken. I fixed it." "The maneuver you performed," she said, her voice dangerously soft. "The decaying harmonic sequence. That is not a technique one learns in a civilian workshop on a border station. That is advanced void dynamics. The kind of tactic developed by elite rescue units during the war." Arden met her gaze, his own expression a carefully constructed mask of indifference. "I read a lot," he said with a slight shrug. "It's a hobby." He knew she did not believe him. The trust between them, already a fragile, theoretical thing based on ancient laws, had just fractured. She respected the shield-bearer, the symbol, but she deeply distrusted the man, Arden Hale. He could see it in the way her eyes lingered on him, searching for the truth he was so desperate to hide. Their journey to the Citadel had just become infinitely more complicated. Later, as the Oathkeeper sailed through the serene, silent depths of void space, Eerie led Arden to a small chamber in the heart of the ship. It was a meditation room, stark and empty, save for a single, large stone floating in the center. The stone was a deep, lustrous black, its surface covered in patterns that mirrored the glowing script on Arden's skin. It was a Zephril stone, a relic from the Valkyrie homeworld. "It sings," Eerie whispered, her small hand reaching out but not quite touching the stone's surface. "The songs of home." Arden could not hear anything, but as he drew closer, he felt a strange vibration in the air, a resonance that seemed to hum in his teeth. And then he felt another sensation, a warmth spreading across his skin. He looked down. The golden patterns on his body were glowing, brighter than before, pulsing in a slow, steady rhythm that matched the vibration from the stone. The air in the room grew thick with an unspoken energy. The stone was singing to him, or he was singing to it. Irie turned to him, her large, dark eyes filled with a certainty that unnerved him. "You are the stone voice," she said, her voice barely audible. It was not a question. It was a pronouncement. The one who answers the archive. Before Arden could ask what she meant, what an archive was, or why he was being given yet another unwanted title, Sarah appeared at the doorway. She saw the glowing marks on Arden's skin, saw the way they resonated with the sacred Zephril stone, and her face went pale. The legend of the shield-bearer was one thing, a tale of honor and sacrifice. But the legend of the stone voice was something else entirely. It was a prophecy, a story about the end and the beginning of their people. A myth so old, she had always assumed it was just that, a myth. At that same moment, halfway across the quadrant, in a sterile observation room of the Concord Bureau of Stability, an analyst flagged a cascade of unusual data streams, whispers from black market channels, encrypted diplomatic communiques, panicked reports from bureau agents on the Morrow Spindle. They all told the same impossible story. A human, a non-entity named Arden Hale, had somehow survived the Valkyrie rite of the Wall. He was now traveling with the last royal heir aboard a Valkyrie warship. The news traveled up the chain of command with terrifying speed. In a high-security office overlooking a cityscape of polished chrome and regulated order, Director Ilex Rourke read the final report, his expression hardening. Rourke was a man who believed in peace above all else, a forced, controlled, and meticulously managed peace, where humanity stood as the firm, guiding hand. Stability was his god, and chaos was his devil, and a human becoming a figure of prophecy for the most powerful warrior race in the Accord was chaos. It was a spark that could ignite a firestorm of fanaticism, upending the delicate balance of power he had spent his entire career maintaining. It was a threat. "This cannot be allowed to stand," Rourke said to the empty room. He activated his private comm line, his voice cold and precise. "Issue a sector-wide warrant for the man known as Arden Hale. Charge sedition and the deliberate incitement of a prohibited warrior ritual. I want him taken alive. He has something we need to understand, and then we will make him disappear." Aboard the Oathkeeper, the alert chimed, not with the panicked urgency of a battle alarm, but with the cold finality of an official decree. A message scrolled across the main view screen on the bridge, the seal of the Concord Bureau of Stability displayed prominently at the top. Sarah read the words, then turned to look at Arden, who had just returned from the meditation chamber. She did not need to speak. He saw the arrest warrant, his own face staring back at him from the official bulletin, his new status as an interstellar fugitive declared for all to see. His plan to deliver Erie and then fade back into the shadows was gone, incinerated by the cold, hard reality of interstellar politics. He was no longer just a reluctant protector. He was a target, and he had just dragged everyone on this ship into the line of fire with him. He looked from the warrant to Erie, who stood beside him, her small hand having found his. The expression on his face settled into one of grim resolve. His quiet life was over. The symphony was playing, and he was, against all logic and desire, its unwilling conductor. Director Ilex Rourke stood before a wall of silent, flowing data in his office high above the sterile cityscape of Concordia. The wall was his window into the soul of the galaxy, a river of intelligence streams, market fluctuations, and whispered secrets. He saw peace not as a natural state, but as a complex machine, a delicate assembly of gears and levers that required constant, meticulous maintenance. He was the chief engineer of that machine, and a human spanner had just been thrown into the works. The name, Arden Hale, was a dissonant chord in his carefully composed symphony of stability. Rourke had personally reviewed the man's file, or rather, the lack of one. A ghost, a mechanic on a forgotten station. Such men were supposed to be footnotes, not headlines. Yet, this footnote was now a figure of Valkyrie prophecy. It was illogical, inefficient, and utterly unacceptable. Prophecy is the engine of chaos, Rourke murmured to his reflection in the data wall. His face was calm, his features composed, but his eyes held the cold intensity of a man who sees a flawed calculation that threatens the integrity of his entire system. It gives the desperate a justification for their desperation. It gives the ambitious a divine right to their ambition. He turned away from the wall and addressed his aide, a severe-looking woman named Kaylin, who stood with perfect stillness by the door. Begin dissemination of Narrative Protocol Sigma. The story is, this Arden Hale is not a savior. He is an operative, a human extremist, cultivated by a radical Valkyrie faction, designed to trigger the right of the wall as a pretext for war. He is a carefully crafted martyr, a pawn being used to shatter the Accord of Lumen. The evidence is thin, Director, Kaylin stated, her voice flat, betraying no judgment. Evidence is a raw material, Kaylin. We shape it to build the structure we require, Rourke replied smoothly. Amplify reports of recent Valkyrie fleet movements, however minor. Fabricate intelligence chatter about their desire to reclaim lost territories. Leak a forged psychological profile of Hale that paints him as unstable, messianic, and easily manipulated, and double the bounty for his live capture. I want every pirate, bounty hunter, and opportunistic scoundrel from here to the Chorus Rift to see him as a winning lottery ticket. We will turn public opinion against him so thoroughly that even the Valkyrie will begin to doubt the divinity of their new pet. Rourke paused, his gaze distant. The Valkyrie are a people of honor. Flood the system with a narrative that suggests their most sacred right has been dishonored, co-opted by a human trickster. Doubt is a more effective weapon than a dreadnought. Let them question their own faith. Let them see him not as a shield, but as a stain. He looked back at Kaylin. Stability must be maintained, at any cost. Aboard the Oathkeeper, the cost was already being calculated in units of trust. The Concord Bureau of Stability arrest warrant hung in the air between Arden and Sarah, like a shroud. To the wardens, it was an insult, a baseless accusation against the holy shield-bearer. To Sarah, it was a complication that confirmed her deepest suspicions. To Arden, it was just another Tuesday in his new, spectacularly awful life. They're painting me as some kind of secret agent for you, he said, reading the filtered news reports on a secondary screen. A human puppet meant to start a war. They're very creative. I'll give them that. They are liars. One of the wardens, a burly, scarred veteran named Jor, growled. They seek to profane the right. They seek to control the story. Arden corrected him, his voice grim. And right now, they're winning. He looked at Sarah. This bounty means we can't dock at any civilized port. We're fugitives. We do not require civilized ports, Sarah said, her voice tight. Our destination is the Citadel, and we are almost there. The ship dropped out of void transit into a sector of space that felt ancient and wrong. Before them hung a celestial body unlike any Arden had ever seen. It was the corpse of a creature from a forgotten cosmic era, a leviathan of impossible scale, its fossilized body miles long. Its back was a vast, hollowed-out landscape of petrified bone and crystalline structures. And nestled within this colossal cradle was a city, the Citadel in void. Towers of glowing metal and sculpted rock rose from the creature's spine, connected by bridges of light. It was a breathtaking, mythic sight, a city built in the belly of a dead god. As they approached, a flight of Valkyrie interceptors, sleek and deadly as shards of obsidian, surrounded them, guiding them toward a docking pylon that extended from the city's highest spire. The moment the airlock hissed open, Arden felt the change. The air was different, charged with a palpable sense of history. Valkyrie in the severe robes of high priests and the ornate armor of the Citadel Guard met them, their faces grim. The welcome was not what Arden had expected. There was no celebration, no awe for the return of the royal heir. There was only a tense, formal gravity. They were led to a vast chamber at the heart of the Citadel, a place called the Hall of Echoes. The walls were lined with dormant zephyral stones, and the acoustics were so perfect that a single footstep seemed to hang in the air for an eternity. An ancient Valkyrie, his face a mask of wrinkled severity, approached them. He was the High Elder, the keeper of the Citadel's traditions. He looked at Eerie. Then his gaze fell upon Arden, lingering on the glowing marks on his skin. There was a flicker of recognition, of shock, but it was quickly masked. "The bloodline has returned," the elder said, his voice like stones grinding together. "But the rite of recognition cannot proceed." "Why?" Sarah demanded, her hand instinctively going to her blade. "The child is here. The shield-bearer is with her. The conditions are met." "The conditions are not met," the elder replied, his gaze unwavering. "The key-singer must be presented by her bonded guardians, both of them. One is missing." Arden looked at Eerie, a new piece of the puzzle clicking into place. The pod she had arrived in, a military model, but small. Too small for a long journey with a full crew. It was a two-person escape vessel, a parent and a child. "Where is your mother, Eerie?" he asked gently. The little girl flinched, her eyes darting toward Sarah before looking at the floor. She did not answer. The silence was heavy with unspoken words. Sarah stepped forward, her expression a stone wall. "Her mother was lost securing her escape. She is gone." "No," Irie whispered, the word so quiet it was almost swallowed by the hall's vastness. "Not gone." She looked up at Sarah, her small face a mask of stubborn grief. "You said we would find her. You promised." Arden saw the flicker of pain and conflict in Sarah's eyes. She was hiding something. The lie was not for him, or the elder, but for the child. The captain, so bound by her code of honor, was capable of deceit. The realization landed like a lead weight in his gut. The rift between them widened. Before the conversation could continue, a deep, resonant hum filled the hall, a sound so low it was felt more than heard. The zephyral stones lining the walls flickered, their internal light dimming. One of the priests rushed forward, his face pale. "High Elder, the guide stars are going out." They moved to an observatory dome at the top of the spire. The view was of the starfield surrounding the Citadel. But it was wrong. Patches of the brilliant tapestry of space were simply gone. Blank. Perfect circles of absolute blackness, as if a cosmic hole punch had erased the stars from existence. As they watched, another star near the edge of a blank patch flickered, distorted, and then vanished, eaten by the silence. "The Null Choir," Sarah breathed, her voice filled with a cold dread. "This is their work. A void voice reality weapon. It doesn't destroy the stars. It erases their frequency from reality. It creates pockets of absolute nothing." "Why?" Arden asked, his mind racing. "What's the strategic value?" "They are not conquerors," the High Elder said, his voice grim. "They are censors. They are cutting us off from the great song, from the archive." "They're trying to deafen you," Arden realized aloud. The word song triggered a memory, the resonance he had felt with the Zephyral stone. Irie's words, stone voice, the one who answers the archive. The pieces were coming together into a picture he did not understand, but knew was terrifyingly important. This was not just about kidnapping a royal heir. This was about silencing an entire civilization. Panic began to ripple through the Citadel Guard. Their navigation systems were failing, their connection to the outer galaxy being systematically severed. They were being isolated, marooned in a sea of encroaching silence. Arden watched the creeping blackness, and something stirred in the back of his mind. A memory of a different kind of signal. A language not of words or data, but of pure frequency. A universal distress code used by the most ancient spacefaring races. A protocol so old it predated the human sphere. It was a language of rescue, a language his old unit, Echo Hand, had specialized in. He turned to the High Elder. Your communication systems, are they based on resonance principles? Do they have a manual override for acoustic frequency modulation? The Elder looked at him, surprised. They do. But the access codes are known only to the High Chanters. It is a dead language. It's not dead if you know how to listen, Arden said. He found a comms terminal and began to work. His hands moved with a surety that had nothing to do with ship repair. He was not inputting commands. He was composing. He tapped out a series of resonating pings, a complex rhythm of overlapping frequencies. It was the ancient call, the first question of any rescuer. Is anyone there? A line of light, thin as a thread, appeared on the schematic of the Citadel displayed on the screen. It was an echo, a response from deep within the city's infrastructure. It was not a data pathway. It was an acoustic tunnel, a maintenance conduit designed to carry diagnostic sound waves, leading directly to the Citadel's core. A back door. Sarah watched him, her suspicion warring with a dawning, grudging respect. Where did you learn that? I told you, Arden said without looking at her. I read a lot. The creeping silence outside was having an effect on Irie. Arden found her huddled in a small antechamber, her body trembling, her breathing shallow and fast. He knelt in front of her. The sight of her terror cut through his own fear and frustration. He was no stone voice, no shield bearer. He was just a guy who did not want to see a kid suffer. Hey, he said softly. Look at me. She looked up, her eyes wide with panic. You're breathing too fast, he said. You're going to make yourself dizzy. We're going to breathe together. Okay, we're going to count. In for 4. Hold for 4. Out for 4. Like this. He took a slow, deep breath, counting on his fingers. He held it, then exhaled just as slowly. You try, with me. 1, 2, 3, 4. She tried. Her first few attempts shaky and ragged, but he kept his voice calm and steady, his eyes locked on hers. He counted with her again, and again, slowly. Her panicked gasps evened out into a steady rhythm. The trembling in her small shoulders subsided. A fragile connection formed between them in that quiet room, a bond forged not of prophecy or ancient rites, but of a simple, human act of kindness. He was not her father, but in that moment, he was the only anchor she had in a universe that was trying to erase her. Better, he asked. She nodded, her hand reaching out and taking his. Her grip was small, but surprisingly strong. They won't get the song, she said, her voice filled with a child's fierce conviction. You won't let them. His newfound purpose was interrupted by the sudden, jarring clang of docking clamps locking onto the Citadel's hull. Not Valkyrie ships. Heavy, functional, brutalist designs. The sigil of the Concord Bureau of Stability was emblazoned on their sides. They had found him. A squadron of CBS enforcers in heavy battle armor stormed into the Hall of Echoes, their weapons raised. But they did not fire. They formed 2 disciplined lines, creating a path for the man who followed them, Director Ilex Rourke. He was taller than Arden expected, dressed in a simple but impeccably tailored gray uniform. He moved with an unhurried confidence, his calm expression a terrifying contrast to the armed soldiers surrounding him. His eyes scanned the room, dismissing the Valkyrie priests and warriors as irrelevant, and settled on Arden. "Arden Hale," Rourke said, his voice calm and reasonable. "I am Director Rourke of the Concord Bureau of Stability. We are here under the authority of the Accord of Lumen to offer protective custody to the Valkyrie heir and to you." "We don't need your protection," Sarah snarled, stepping in front of Arden and Erie, her blade drawn. Rourke ignored her, his attention fixed on Arden. "You have found yourself in a very complicated situation, Mr. Hale. You have been manipulated by a militant faction of the Valkyrie. They are using you to legitimize their claim to power and to destabilize the entire quadrant. But it doesn't have to be this way." He took a step closer. "I am offering you a way out, a full pardon. Your name cleared, a quiet life on any world you choose. All I ask is that you hand over the child. She will be placed in a neutral, secure environment until this political instability is resolved. Help me restore order, Mr. Hale. Help me maintain the peace." It was a tempting offer. Everything Arden thought he wanted was being handed to him on a silver platter. The quiet life, the anonymity, a way out of this mythic nightmare. All he had to do was trade a child for it. He looked at Rourke's calm, rational face and saw the soul of the machine he had been running from his whole life. A system that traded people for stability, that sacrificed the few for the comfort of the many. He felt Irie's small hand tighten in his. He thought of her panicked breathing, of the trust in her eyes. "No," Arden said, the word clear and final. Rourke's pleasant expression did not change, but a flicker of cold annoyance appeared in his eyes. "A disappointing, if predictable, response. I had hoped you were more pragmatic." He turned his gaze to Sarah. "Captain Nix, your citadel is now surrounded by a fleet of CBS warships. They have orders to enforce the Accord's mandate. Any resistance will be met with overwhelming force. We will not destroy your home, but we will place it under permanent quarantine. No one in, no one out. Your song, as you call it, will be silenced forever, trapped within these walls, unless you comply." He let the threat hang in the air. "Hand over the fugitive, Arden Hale. Do this, and your citadel will remain free." The choice was brutal. Sarah was trapped between two impossible oaths: her sacred duty to protect the shield-bearer, and her duty as a warden to protect the citadel and all the lives within it. Arden saw the agony on her face, the war raging behind her eyes. He saw her look at the armed CBS soldiers, at the calm, implacable face of Director Rourke, and then at the ancient priests and the terrified civilians of her home. Her honor, her entire existence was built on a code that had no answer for this. With a movement that looked like it caused her physical pain, Sarah turned to her wardens. "Jor, take him." The big warden looked at her, his face a mask of disbelief. "Captain, we cannot—" "That is an order!" she roared, her voice cracking with the strain. Arden did not resist as Jor and another warden took his arms. He felt a profound, cold sense of betrayal, but it was overshadowed by a flicker of understanding. She was doing what she had to do. She was a captain choosing her ship, her crew, over a single passenger. He had seen it 100 times. It was just the first time that passenger was him. Sarah would not meet his eyes. She looked at Rourke, her face carved from stone. "You have your fugitive. Now honor your word. Leave the citadel." Rourke gave a small, triumphant smile. "Of course, Captain. The Bureau always honors its agreements." As the wardens handed Arden over to the waiting CBS enforcers, who clamped heavy magnetic binders on his wrists, his eyes met Sarah's for a single, fleeting moment. The trust that had been fractured was now shattered, perhaps irrevocably. He was a prisoner, and she was the one who had handed him his chains. The journey from the Citadel to the conquered Bureau of Stability flagship was short and silent. Arden Hale was a piece of cargo, clamped in magnetic binders, surrounded by armored enforcers who looked at him with a mixture of curiosity and contempt. He was the human who had embarrassed the Valkyrie, the convenient scapegoat, the problem to be solved. He met their blank helmet visors with a stony indifference he did not feel. Inside, a cold rage was battling a weary resignation. Sarah's face as she gave the order was burned into his memory, the face of a captain making an impossible choice, the face of a woman sacrificing one to save the many. He understood the brutal logic of it. That did not mean he had to like it. He was not taken to a holding cell. He was taken to a transmission chamber, a sterile white room dominated by a single, holographic projector. Director Ilex Rourke was waiting for him, looking as calm and composed as if he were about to begin a board meeting. "We will be addressing the Interspecies Accord Council via live broadcast," Rourke informed him, his voice smooth as polished marble. "You will stand here. You will not speak unless spoken to. You are here to be seen, not heard, a symbol of the chaos we have averted." "And if I decide to start singing and dancing?" Arden asked, the magnetic binders heavy on his wrists. Rourke smiled, a thin, bloodless expression. "The binders can deliver a paralytic shock that will leave you conscious and upright but incapable of controlling so much as an eyelid. I would advise against it. Stage fright. You understand." The holographic projector whirred to life. The sterile room dissolved, replaced by the grand, circular chamber of the Accord Council on Concordia. Representatives from a dozen species looked out at them, their holographic images shimmering with gravitas. Arden recognized the regal, insectoid Cathar, the amorphous, crystalline Luminous, and the stern, four-eyed emissary of the human sphere. This was the theater of power, and he was the star of a show he had never auditioned for. Rourke stepped forward, his image projected 30 feet high. He was a master of this stage. His voice was a finely tuned instrument of reason and control. "Honored members of the Council," he began. "Today, the Concord Bureau of Stability has successfully de-escalated a crisis that threatened to shatter the peace we have all worked so hard to maintain. We have taken into custody the human operative, Arden Hale." He gestured to Arden, who stood silently, letting the accusation wash over him. "This man," Rourke continued, his voice resonating with false sincerity, "was the central component in a plot by a radical Valkyrie faction to provoke a quadrant-wide war, using forbidden techniques to artificially trigger one of their most sacred rites. They sought to create a messianic figure, a human martyr to rally their warriors and legitimize a new campaign of aggression." A murmur went through the holographic council members. The narrative was simple, clean, and terrifying. It played on everyone's deepest fears, the unpredictable, honor-bound fury of the Valkyrie. "By intervening," Rourke said, his voice rising, "the Bureau has not only prevented this conflict but has also exposed the dangerous fanaticism at its heart. We have proven that the Accord of Lumen is strong, that our commitment to stability will not waver. The operative is in custody. The Valkyrie heir is secure. Order has been restored." In the Hall of Echoes on the Citadel, Sarah Nix watched the broadcast on a public view screen, her stomach churning with a mixture of guilt and acid. The faces of her people around her were a mixture of confusion and shame. They were being portrayed as warmongers, their most sacred right a political trick. And she had handed the Bureau the very man they were using as proof. She had traded her honor for a fragile, temporary safety, and the price was this public humiliation. Eerie stood beside her, clutching her hand, her small face pale as she watched the man who had protected her being paraded like a war criminal. As Rourke finished his speech, basking in the council's relieved applause, the universe answered him. It began, not as a sound, but as the sudden, shocking absence of it. A deep, penetrating wrongness that cut through the citadel like a physical blow. The constant, low hum of the city's life support systems vanished. The distant clang of the forges went silent. The murmur of the crowd in the Hall of Echoes was snuffed out. It was a silence so profound it felt like a pressure against the eardrums. Then came the disorientation. A wave of vertigo swept through the citadel. The floor seemed to tilt, the walls to warp. The steady, rhythmic pulse of the city's power grid, a heartbeat that had beaten for centuries, began to stutter. Lights flickered erratically. The massive towers of the citadel groaned, a sound of stressed, ancient bone. "What is happening?" the High Elder demanded, his voice thin in the terrifying quiet. Sarah knew. "The Null Choir," she breathed, her blood running cold. They had not been defeated. They had not retreated. They had simply been waiting. "They're cutting the spectrum, all of it." On the CBS flagship, the transmission to the council dissolved into a cascade of static. Rourke's calm facade finally cracked. "Report," he snapped. Total frequency blackout. "Director," an officer yelled. "We've lost all contact with the Citadel, with our own fleet, with everything. All channels are dead. It's not jamming. It's nothing. There's just nothing there." The ship shuddered, a low, groaning vibration that had nothing to do with its engines. The void voice was washing over them, too. "In the Hall of Echoes," Eerie cried out, her hands flying to her ears. "It's wrong," she gasped. "The song. It's breaking. The archive is screaming." The High Elder stumbled, his face a mask of horror. He turned to the other priests. "The archive. They are attacking the archive itself." He looked at Eerie, his eyes wide with a desperate, final understanding. The carefully guarded secret could be kept no longer. "She is not just the last of the bloodline," he shouted, his voice ringing with a terrible clarity. "She is the key singer. Her voice is the only thing that can resonate with the resonant archive, the living memory of our people stored in the heart of the Citadel." The revelation hung in the silent air. It explained everything: the hunt, the desperation, the attack on the city's very essence. The Null Choir did not want a hostage. They wanted to erase a history. As the city groaned around them, its rhythm falling apart, Eerie broke away from Sarah and ran. She ran not away from the danger, but toward it. She ran to the one person who had offered her a moment of calm in the chaos. She ran to the broadcast image of Arden Hale. She reached the view screen, now just a wall of flickering static, and pressed her small hand against it, as if she could reach through space itself. "Stone voice," she cried out, her voice filled with a desperate plea. "Help us, the song is dying." On the CBS flagship, in the silent, disconnected transmission chamber, something impossible happened. The golden script on Arden Hale's skin, which had been dormant, suddenly blazed with a brilliant, incandescent light. He felt a jolt, not of electricity, but of pure information. It was as if a key had been turned in his soul. The void voice was no longer just a disorienting pressure. He could hear it. He could understand its structure. It was a song of uncreation, a meticulously engineered anti-frequency designed to cancel reality. It was a weapon of perfect, horrifying silence. And in the heart of that silence, he could hear a terrified counter-melody, a child's voice. Eerie. He could feel her fear, her plea, and through her, he could feel the screaming of the archive. He understood. The marks on his skin were not just a brand. They were an antenna, a receiver. And he was not just a shield. He was a resonator, an amplifier, a countersinger. He knew, with a certainty that defied all logic, what he had to do. He knew the path of the void song, and he knew how to walk it. In the Citadel, Sarah watched Irie's desperate act, heard the High Elder's revelation, and saw the city crumbling around her. Rourke's promise of safety was a lie. Her choice had been a catastrophic mistake. She had disarmed her only real weapon to appease an enemy who had no intention of honoring his word. Her honor was a hollow thing if it led to the death of her people. She drew her blade, its edge humming in the dead air. "Jor," she yelled to her second-in-command. "To the flagship. We are taking him back." "Captain, the Elder Council," Jor began, but she cut him off. "The Elder Council is about to be silenced forever, unless we act," she roared. "Our law was to protect the shield-bearer. I broke that law. I will unbreak it now. For the Citadel, for the Archive." The wardens did not hesitate. Their captain had given them a new oath. Rourke was trying to re-establish control when the explosion blew the doors of the transmission chamber off their hinges. Sarah Nix strode through the smoke and fire, her face a mask of cold fury, her wardens flanking her. "The deal is off, Director," she said, her voice like the edge of her blade. The CBS enforcers raised their weapons, but they were too slow. The wardens moved with the fluid, brutal grace of predators, and the fight was over in seconds. Sarah sliced through Arden's binders with a single, precise stroke of her sword. "I was wrong," she said, her voice low and tight, not meeting his eyes. "I let my fear of your kind, of human deceit, blind me to my duty. I traded my honor for a lie. I am sorry." "Apology accepted," Arden said, rubbing his wrists. "Let's talk about it over drinks after we're not all about to be erased from existence." He looked at Rourke, who was staring at them, his composure finally shattered. "You first, Director." He did not have time to interrogate him. He could feel the Archive's rhythm failing, Erie's desperate call weakening. "The heart chamber," he said to Sarah, "the core of the Citadel. Erie has to get there. Now." "The way is blocked," a priest shouted as he ran up to them, his robes singed. "The city's internal structure is collapsing." "Not all of it," Arden said. He could see it in his mind, the path of the acoustic tunnels he had found earlier, a safe corridor through the chaos. "I can get us there." He turned to Irie, who had been brought by the wardens. He knelt in front of her. "I need you to be brave," he said. "And I need you to sing. Not out loud. Inside. Sing to me. I'll do the rest." He lifted her onto his back, her small arms wrapped around his neck. "Okay," he said to Sarah. "Let's go for a run." It was a mad dash through a dying city. Sarah and her wardens formed a spearhead, cutting a path through rubble and panicked crowds. Arden followed, with Erie clinging to his back. The world around them was a nightmare of tilting floors and groaning metal. But Arden was focused on the song in his head. He could feel the waves of the void voice, the pockets of deadly silence. He moved through them, finding the gaps, the safe passages. He began to tap his hand against his leg. A steady, rhythmic beat. 1, 2, 3, 4. A simple rhythm, a human rhythm, a counterpoint to the unsong of the Null Choir. "You're a mechanic, you said," Sarah shouted over the din as they ran. "First a shield, then a tuning fork," Arden yelled back. "The promotions are getting weird." They reached the entrance to the heart chamber, a massive circular door of carved Zephril stone. It was sealed shut, standing before it, his uniform immaculate amidst the chaos, was Director Rourke, flanked by 2 of his elite guards. He had escaped in the confusion. "It's over, Hale," Rourke said, his voice amplified by the strange acoustics. "You cannot stop this." "But I can. This was always the plan." "What plan?" Arden demanded, setting Erie gently on her feet. "The Null Choir is not an alien menace," Rourke said, a triumphant, manic light in his eyes. "They are a tool, an ancient, pre-accord weapon I rediscovered, a machine that creates perfect, controllable silence. I made a deal with them. I gave them data on Valkyrie resonance frequencies. enough to isolate the Citadel, in exchange for control of the Void Voice technology. It is the ultimate deterrent, the ultimate peacekeeper, the ability to silence any voice, any culture, that dares to threaten my order. He was a madman, a zealot who had mistaken control for peace, silence for stability. "You would erase a whole people for the sake of order?" Sarah asked, her voice trembling with rage. "To save billions, sacrifices must be made," Rourke screamed. "You will not interfere." He raised a device in his hand, a controller for the choir. But Sarah was faster. She lunged, not at Rourke, but at his guards. The wardens engaged them, and the heart chamber's entrance became a maelstrom of flashing blades and blaster fire. Rourke turned to fire his own sidearm at Arden, but Arden was already moving, tackling him, the two of them crashing to the floor. Arden was a mechanic, not a soldier, but he was strong. He wrenched the weapon from Rourke's hand, throwing it away. He had the man pinned, his forearm against his throat. He could end it. He could crush the life out of the man who had caused all of this, the man who would trade a civilization for a weapon. He saw the hatred and fear in Rourke's eyes, and he saw the reflection of his own face, twisted in a mask of violence. He was not an executioner. He was a rescuer. With a roar of frustration, Arden heaved Rourke off him, not into a chasm, but against one of the massive acoustic pillars that flanked the door. He picked up a fallen CBS binder and clamped Rourke's wrist to the pillar. "You want to hear a song, Director?" Arden snarled, his face inches from Rourke's. "You're going to hear all of them." He placed his hand on the pillar. He focused, channeling not a counter melody, but a memory. He thought of the stories he had heard, of the people crushed by the Accord's fragile peace, of the cultures silenced in the name of stability. He pushed those feelings, that collective cry, into the resonating stone. The pillar began to hum. It was not a pleasant sound. It was a chorus of pain, a symphony of the silenced. Rourke screamed as the psychic noise flooded his mind, forced to listen to the true cost of his perfect, stable peace. The battle was over. The guards were down. Sarah stood beside him, but the victory was short-lived. A new message pulsed from Rourke's discarded controller, displayed on its small screen. A message from the choir. "Contract void. Control severed. The true song has been heard. Silence must now consume all." The deep, wrong hum of the void voice intensified tenfold. The entire citadel screamed, a final, agonizing cry of a creature being torn apart. The null choir, unleashed from Rourke's control, was no longer just isolating the citadel. It was going to erase it completely. The massive zephyral door to the heart chamber stood before them, a silent, unmoving testament to an age of secrets. The citadel groaned around it, the death rattle of a city being unwritten from reality. The air was thick with the pressure of the void voice, a nauseating anti-sound that vibrated in their bones. Behind them, Ilex Rourke was a gibbering wreck, chained to his pillar of sonic torment, his own weapon turned against him. It was a fitting, if temporary, justice. "It's sealed!" Sarah shouted, over the rising cacophony of the Citadel's collapse. "The failsafe protocols would have locked it down." "Then, we'll have to knock," Arden replied, his voice strained. He placed Irie gently on her feet and put his own hand flat against the cold, carved stone of the door. The golden script on his arm blazed. He closed his eyes, ignoring the chaos, and listened. He listened past the grinding of dying machinery, past the invasive hum of the null choir. He listened for the heart chamber. He could feel it, a faint, terrified pulse deep within the stone. It was a lock, but it was also a tuning fork. He began to hum, a low, steady tone. He matched the frequency of the door, the note of its existence. Then, with Irie's desperate song still echoing in his mind, he shifted the pitch, creating a harmonic resonance, a key made of sound. "Help me," he whispered to the child beside him. Irie, understanding instinctively, placed her small hand next to his. She added her own clear, silver note to his, a perfect fifth higher. The two sounds intertwined, weaving together into a single, powerful chord. The massive door vibrated, the ancient carvings glowing with a soft, internal light. With a sound like the world's first breath, the stone receded, sliding open to reveal the chamber beyond. The heart chamber was not a room. It was a cathedral of geology, a vast, natural cavern deep within the fossilized Leviathan, its ceiling lost in a darkness pricked with the faint glow of phosphorescent crystals. In the center, dominating the space, was the resonant archive. It was not a machine or a databank, but a colossal, impossibly intricate crystal formation, a geode the size of a small moon, cracked open to reveal a core that pulsed with the light of a captured nebula. A deep, harmonious chord emanated from it, the collective memory of the Valkyrie people, a symphony of 1 billion lives. But the song was sick. The Null Choir's influence was a visible blight upon the crystal. Veins of black, dead-looking silence spread across its luminous surface, and the pure, resonant chord was now warped and dissonant, filled with jarring, ugly notes of panic. "If that crystal shatters," the High Elder said, having followed them in, his face ashen, "the resulting sonic shockwave will vaporize this entire sector. If the choir silences it completely, our history, our very identity, will cease to have ever existed." "So, no pressure then," Arden muttered. He looked at the failing, cosmic instrument before him and felt a crushing wave of inadequacy. He was a mechanic. He fixed busted engines and faulty conduits. He did not tune the souls of civilizations. "The prophecy," the Elder pressed, his eyes fixed on Arden. "It speaks of two voices, the key singer to unlock the melody, and the stone voice to provide the grounding harmony, the counter-rhythm that holds the song together against the silence. You must anchor the archive." "I don't know how," Arden shot back, the frustration and fear boiling over. "This was never my fight. I was part of a rescue team, that's all. Not some chosen one." Sarah turned to him, her expression stripped of all its warrior severity, leaving only a raw, desperate plea. "You know more than you let on, Arden. I've seen it. The way you handled the ship, the way you found the path here. What are you not telling us?" He looked at her, at the trust she was offering him, even after her betrayal. He looked at Irie, who was watching him with unwavering faith. The ghosts of his past were no longer a luxury he could afford. "My unit was called Echo Hand," he said, the words feeling like rust in his mouth. "We were a special operations rescue service, not military. Our job was to go into disasters no one else could handle: collapsed orbitals, ships trapped in reality fluxes, first contact situations gone wrong. We specialized in communication, not language but frequency. We learned to coordinate between human tech, alien biology, even nascent machine consciousness. We found a way to make everyone sing in the same key, long enough to get them out alive." His face hardened. "I left because my superiors saw what we could do. They didn't see a rescue tool. They saw a weapon, a way to control, to manipulate, to silence any voice that didn't match their own. They wanted to build a choir of their own." He looked toward the entrance, where Rourke's muffled screams could still be heard. "Just like him, I exposed them, and in return, they erased me. I chose to be a ghost rather than let my work be used to hurt people." He took a deep, shuddering breath. "I ran from this, from the responsibility of it, and it found me anyway." He looked at the dying archive. "I know the principle. Eerie is the melody. She can find the true song. But I have to build a firewall of rhythm around her, a beat so strong and stable that the silence can't get through." "Then do it," Sarah urged. "I need an instrument," he said, his eyes scanning the chamber. "Something to keep the tempo. Something solid." He looked down at his own hands. They were empty. Then he saw it, lying on the floor near a fallen CBS enforcer. A heavy, industrial-grade impact hammer, used for emergency hull repairs. It was brutal, simple, and solid. Perfect. He picked it up, the weight of it familiar and reassuring in his hand. He looked at Sarah with a flash of his old gallows humor. "There's no conductor's baton in the rescue kit," he said with a wry smile. "But a hammer will do, if you hit the right spot." He turned to the wardens. "The choir isn't just a frequency. It's becoming physical. You need to buy us time. Keep anything that comes through that door away from us." "What are we fighting?" Jor asked, his massive hand gripping his glaive. "Absence," Arden said grimly. "Emptiness. Good luck." He led Irie to the base of the colossal archive crystal. The floor here was a smooth, obsidian-like plate, a part of the Citadel's core structure. He placed Irie's hand on the crystal. "Just like we practiced," he said to her, his voice soft. "Breathe. Find the quiet place inside, and find the song. Sing it to me. I'll catch you if you fall." She nodded, her small face set with a terrible resolve. She closed her eyes and began to sing, not with her voice, but with her very essence. A melody of pure, silver light began to flow from her into the archive. For a moment, the black veins of silence receded, and the dissonant chords sweetened. But the null choir answered. From the entrance of the chamber, shimmering distortions in the air began to appear. They looked like heat haze at first, but they were cold, sucking the warmth from the air. They resolved into floating, slowly drifting spheres of perfect blackness, apertures of silence. "Hold the line!" Sarah roared. A warden stepped forward to intercept one of the spheres. He swung his glaive, a weapon of energized, hyper-dense metal. The blade passed through the sphere without effect. Then, the sphere touched his chest. There was no sound, no explosion, no flash of light. The warden in a perfectly circular section of his armor and the stone floor beneath him were simply gone, erased. The fight was a nightmare. The wardens could not strike the enemy. They could only deflect them, using the repulsor fields on their shields to herd the deadly spheres of nothing away from the chamber's center. It was a battle against a concept, a desperate dance to keep existence from being deleted. Arden ignored them. He had his own war to fight. He raised the hammer. As Irie's melody grew stronger, he could feel the chaotic, arrhythmic pulse of the null choir trying to break through. He had to give her a beat to hold on to. He struck the obsidian floor with the hammer. Clang. The sound was shockingly pure, a deep, resonant note that cut through the silence. It was the sound of something real, something solid. The golden script on his body flared, the sound of the impact traveling up his arm and through his very being, amplifying, becoming a grounding rhythm. Clang! 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 He found the tempo, a steady 4/4 beat, the rhythm of a healthy heart, the rhythm of a marching soldier, the rhythm of a rescuer counting breaths in the dark. He poured all of his focus, all of his will, into that simple, repeating pattern. He was the drum. He was the metronome. He was the wall of rhythm against the chaos. But the strain was immense. The void voice pushed against his mind, trying to break his concentration, and the physical toll on Irie was even greater. Her small body was trembling, her breathing growing ragged. The pure, silver melody began to waver, to falter. Life support in the chamber was failing, the air growing thin and cold. Arden's own lungs were burning. He saw Irie stumble, her connection to the archive flickering. She was suffocating, both physically and spiritually. He had a rebreather on his belt, scavenged from one of the CBS guards. His own vision was starting to tunnel from the lack of oxygen. Every instinct screamed at him to use it, to save himself. He looked at Erie's face, pale and struggling. She was just a child. He was a rescuer. The choice was not a choice at all. He stopped his rhythm for a single, terrifying heartbeat. In that one moment of silence, the void voice surged, and a crack raced across the face of the great archive crystal. Sarah screamed his name. Arden ignored it. He grabbed the rebreather, shoved it against Irie's mouth, and held it there. "Breathe," he commanded. The rush of pure oxygen revitalized her. Her eyes shot open, clear and focused. The silver melody did not just return. It exploded from her. A soaring, triumphant area of life and memory. He let go of the mask and raised the hammer again, his own head spinning, black spots dancing in his vision. He found the beat once more, his tired arms swinging, his will afire in the gathering dark. Clang. And then everything locked into place. Irie's soaring melody and his unwavering rhythm fused. It was not two sounds, but one. A perfect, resonant harmony. A wave of force, of pure music, erupted from them. The golden script on Arden's skin did not just glow. It became liquid light, flowing down his arm, off his fingers, and onto the obsidian floor. The light solidified, forming luminous, root-like patterns that burned themselves into the stone, anchoring the rhythm, making it a permanent part of the Citadel's foundation. He had staked the beat into the heart of the world. The effect was instantaneous and absolute. The spheres of silence, the apertures of nothing, froze in midair. Their perfect blackness wavered, and then they began to sing. It was a horrible sound, a cacophony of a million terrified voices, a chorus of screams, whispers, and cries for help, all compressed into a single, agonizing chord. The void voice was not silence. It was silenced voices. The null choir was not an enemy. It was a prison. The black spheres dissolved, not into nothing, but into a shower of harmless, multicolored static. The unsong had been broken. The prisoners had been freed. The great archive crystal resonated with the new, stable harmony. The black veins vanished, healed by the pure song. Its light returned, brighter and stronger than ever, washing the heart chamber in the warm glow of a nascent star. The dissonant hum of the dying city was replaced by a pure, steady, life-giving tone. The Citadel was saved. The fight was over. The hammer fell from Arden's nerveless fingers. He collapsed to his knees, his body trembling with exhaustion, his lungs screaming for air. His hand was still flat on the floor, connected to the glowing, newly formed patterns of his own rhythm. The surviving wardens, Sarah, the priests, they all stood in a silent, awestruck circle. They were looking at the human, the mechanic, the ghost, who had just become a permanent, living part of their world. The resonant archive was stable, but its rhythm, its very heartbeat, was now irrevocably keyed to the man kneeling at its center. The silence that followed the storm was more profound than the one the null choir had tried to impose. It was a silence of awe, of exhaustion, of a world pulled back from the brink. In the heart chamber, the resonant archive pulsed with a calm, steady, golden light, its grand symphony restored. The air was clean and carried the pure, life-affirming tone of a perfectly struck chord. It was the sound of a history saved. Arden Hale remained on his knees at the crystal's base, his hand resting on the floor where the luminous, golden script of his own making was now a permanent, intricate inlay in the obsidian stone. The rhythm he had hammered into the Citadel's core was now its heartbeat, and he could feel that beat thrumming back up his arm, a steady, reassuring pulse that echoed in his own chest. He was tired, a deep, bone-weary exhaustion that went beyond the physical. He had run from his past for a decade, and in the space of a few hours, he had not only confronted it, but had become a living monument to it. Sarah Nix was the first to move. She stepped forward, her armored boots making no sound on the pristine floor. She looked at the man who was both a stranger and the savior of her people, and for the first time, she felt the full, crushing weight of her own failure and the breathtaking scale of his sacrifice. She had been raised on legends of honor, but she had never truly understood the concept until she saw a human mechanic give away his last breath for a child he barely knew. Iri went to him, her small form no longer trembling with fear. She knelt beside him and placed her hand over his on the glowing floor. She did not speak. She simply shared the rhythm with him, her presence a silent testament to their new, unbreakable bond. She was the key singer. He was the stone voice. They were two halves of a song. The aftermath of the Great Silencing, as the news feeds were already calling it, was a political earthquake. The moment the null choir's influence shattered, every comms channel in the sector flooded with the data logs from the CBS flagship. Rourke's confession, his manic rant about control and stability, was broadcast on an open channel by a quick-thinking Valkyrie comms officer. The revelation that the Concord Bureau of Stability had not only known about the null choir, but had actively collaborated with it, weaponizing it against a member species of the Accord, sent shockwaves through the galactic power structure. The machine of peace had been revealed as a potential cage. Director Ilex Rourke was dragged from the heart chamber by the wardens, no longer a master of the universe, but a broken man. The song he had been forced to listen to, the chorus of all the voices silenced in the name of his perfect order, had shattered his fanatical self-assurance. He was babbling, his eyes wide with a terror that would not fade, haunted by the ghosts he himself had created. He was taken into Valkyrie custody, a living symbol of a question that now hung over the entire Accord: what price was too high for peace? Was a silent, stable galaxy truly better than a loud, chaotic, and free one? A few days later, Arden stood before the Valkyrie High Council in the Hall of Echoes. He had been given clean clothes, food, and a quiet room to recover, but he felt the steady thrum of the archive in his bones every waking moment. It was a part of him now. The glowing golden script on his skin was no longer a brand or a series of scars. It was a living map of that connection, its light pulsing in time with the Citadel's core. The High Elder, his face carved with a new, profound respect, addressed him. Arden Hale, you are the stone voice of prophecy. You have anchored the great song and saved our people from oblivion. There are no words in our tongue to express the depth of our gratitude. He gestured to the assembled Valkyrie lords and priests. The council has reached a unanimous decision. We ask you to accept the title and station of Keeper of the Beat. You will be granted a place of honor within our society, a voice on this council, and the sacred duty of guarding the resonant archive for all time. It was a princely offer, a title, a home, a purpose, everything a man adrift was supposed to want. Arden looked at the serious, expectant faces of the Valkyrie. He thought of his quiet workshop on the Morrow Spindle, the comforting smell of hot metal, and the simple honesty of a well-tuned engine. With all due respect, High Elder, Arden said, his voice quiet but clear in the hall's perfect acoustics. I'm a mechanic. A murmur of confusion went through the council. I fix things that are broken, he continued. That's what I do. What I did in there. It was the biggest repair job of my life. But it was still a repair job. Your archive doesn't need a lord sitting on a throne. It needs a good engineer to make sure the rhythm stays steady, to listen for any dissonance, and to tighten the bolts when they come loose. I am honored by your offer, truly, but I cannot accept it. He could feel their disappointment, but he had to be true to the only thing he had left himself. He was not a keeper, a lord, or a prophet. He was the man who had picked up a hammer when the universe needed a heartbeat. Later that evening, he found Sarah Nix on a high balcony overlooking the city. The Citadel was vibrant with a renewed energy. its lights shining with a fierce, defiant brilliance against the star-dusted void. She was not wearing her captain's armor, but a simple, dark tunic. Without the severe lines of her battle gear, she looked different, younger, more vulnerable. She did not turn as he approached. "They are calling you the mechanic of the song in the lower city," she said, her voice soft. "It seems you have found your own title." "It's better than shield bearer," he admitted, standing beside her. "Less pressure." They stood in a comfortable silence for a long moment, watching the celestial ballet. "I came to apologize again," she said finally, turning to face him. "Properly this time. Not as a captain, but as me." She took a deep breath. "My whole life, I was taught that humans were fragile, devious, that your promises were written in sand. I judged you by the actions of your worst, not by the potential of your best. I let that prejudice cloud my duty. When I handed you to Rourke, I broke my oath to the right. I failed you. You were trying to save your people, Sarah," he said. "It was an impossible choice." "No," she said, her gaze intense. "It was a failure of faith. I did not trust you, and you, in turn, trusted me with everything." She reached up and touched the hilt of the ceremonial blade that still hung at her side. "In our way, when a warrior's honor has been compromised, she can reforge it only by binding it to an honor greater than her own." She drew the blade, not in aggression, but in offering. "I wish to bind my oath mark to you, Ardenhale." He looked at her, confused. "I thought you said that was for your clan, your captain." "There is another kind of bond," she explained, her voice dropping lower. "It is not a political contract or a marriage. It is a warrior's promise, a vow of companionship. It means my honor is now tied to your journey. It means my blade will always be between you and the silence. It means where you go, I will go, not as a guard, but as a partner." He was stunned. It was the most profound offer he had ever received. A promise of loyalty from a woman who saw honor as the bedrock of existence. He looked at her, at the fierce sincerity in her eyes, and felt a warmth spread through his chest that had nothing to do with the archive. "I'm not much of a commander, Sarah," he said with a small, wry smile. "Good," she replied, the corner of her mouth twitching in a faint smile of her own. "I'm not much of a follower." The galaxy was changing. The story of the mechanic who saved history had become a phenomenon. Civilian news networks, emboldened by the CBS's public disgrace, spread the tale with fervor. It was a story that resonated with the common person everywhere. It was not a king or a politician or a genetically engineered super soldier who had faced down the great darkness. It was a regular person, a worker with a simple tool and a stubborn refusal to let a child be harmed. A quiet rebellion began to brew, a popular movement questioning the Accord's cold, political machinations, especially the ward system that treated children as diplomatic bargaining chips. People were tired of being cogs in a machine of peace they had no say in. They wanted to have their own song. Erie, too, was transformed. She was no longer the timid, terrified refugee from a broken life pod. She spent her days in the heart chamber, not as a princess, but as an apprentice. She learned to listen to the great archive, to feel its rhythms and melodies. Her bond with Arden was the core of her new world. He was not just her protector. He was her family, a family chosen by circumstance and cemented by sacrifice. He taught her how to count her breaths, and she taught him how to read the patterns of the archive's light. Arden presented his final decision to the council. He would not stay. He could not. The steady, quiet life of the Citadel was not his, but he would not abandon his responsibility either. "I accept the duty," he told them, "but not the title. I will be your traveling engineer. I'll go out into the galaxy, Listen for the broken notes, for the other voices that have been silenced. And when the archive needs me, when its rhythm falters, I will return. Give me a ship. Give me the right to come and go as I please. That is all I ask." The council, after a long deliberation, agreed. They understood. The stone voice was not meant to be a statue in a hall. He was a current, a resonance that needed to move. He stood on the bridge of a small, fast Valkyrie scout ship, the Stray Cord. It was a beautiful vessel, sleek and powerful. Eerie was at a secondary console, tracing the constellations with a look of intense concentration. She would stay at the Citadel, her place now secure, but she had come to see them off. Sarah stood beside him at the main viewport, her arms crossed. She was in her captain's armor once more, but it felt different now. It was not a barrier between them. "So," he said, looking out at the endless river of stars. "A disgraced rescue specialist, a renegade warrior captain, and a ship named for a bad note. We're quite a team." "The most interesting songs are often in a minor key," she replied, a genuine smile gracing her lips. "Where to, mechanic?" He smiled back. "I'm not sure, but the galaxy is full of broken things. Let's go find something to fix." It felt like a beginning, a real one. But as he turned his attention to the ship's diagnostic panel, his eyes fell upon a data slate recovered from Rourke's flagship. It contained the fragmented, corrupted core files of the Null Choir's operational code. Most of it was gibberish, the ravings of a machine built on fear. But one line of code, a comment left by its original programmer, was chillingly clear. It was a date stamp, centuries old, long before Rourke could have possibly found it. And a single, cryptic note. "Nurture protocol complete. The silence is now self-sustaining, awaiting the final quiet." Rourke had not created the Null Choir. He had not even been its first master. He had simply found a weapon that someone else had already built, nurtured, and unleashed. The song was safe for now, but the composer of the silence was still out there. The Stray Cord hung in the void, its engines silent. Before it, the Morrow spindle turned on its ancient axis, a familiar monument to rust and persistence. It had been months since they had left the Citadel, months of traveling the quiet lanes of the galaxy, of listening to the whispers between stars, of finding their own rhythm as a crew of two. Arden Hale looked at his old home and felt not a pang of nostalgia, but the quiet satisfaction of a man looking at a completed circuit. It was a place he had been, not a place he belonged to anymore. "Are you sure about this?" Sarah's voice came from beside him on the small bridge. "Returning here could draw unwanted attention." "I have to finish a job I started," Arden replied, his eyes on the docking bay where Irie's life pod still sat in quarantine. "And I need to pick up a few tools." They docked without fanfare. The station was much as he had left it, a chaotic hub of commerce and desperation. But the atmosphere had changed. The news of the Great Silencing and the CBS's fall from grace had trickled down even to this forgotten edge of space. There was a new energy in the air, a spark of defiance. People looked at the Valkyrie captain at his side, not with fear, but with a kind of grudging respect. The story of the mechanic and the warrior had become a quiet legend. He went to his old workshop. The door was still sealed, inside. Everything was just as he had left it, covered in a thin layer of dust. The scent of hot metal and old grievances still lingered in the recycled air. He felt like a ghost visiting his own grave. Sarah stood in the doorway, watching him as he moved through the space, his hands running over the familiar surfaces of his workbench, his diagnostic tools, his calibration monitors. He was a different man from the one who had lived here. The golden script on his skin was a testament to that, a soft, pulsing light under his simple tunic. "The patterns have been changing," Sarah said, her voice pulling him from his reverie. She had been observing him for weeks with the keen eye of a warrior, noticing details no one else would. They are not static, like an oath mark. They move. Arden held up his arm. The intricate golden lines were indeed in a different configuration than they had been a week ago. They were a slow, flowing river of light. "They're not just on me anymore," he said. "They're connected to her." He could feel it constantly now, a faint, thrumming resonance that was not the archive, but Eerie herself. When she was happy, the light was warm and bright. When she was studying and grew frustrated, the patterns would tighten into complex, sharp-edged knots. "It's like a living map of her heart," he murmured, "a resonance chart." They went to the docking bay where the battered life pod sat. Jax, the old dockmaster, greeted them with a grunt that was almost friendly. "Heard you got a promotion. Hail," he said, his cybernetic eye whirring as it focused on Sarah. "Came with a better view, I see." "Something like that," Arden said. "I'm here to finish the repairs on this pod." He spent the next 2 days working on the small craft. It was a strange homecoming, falling back into the old, familiar rhythms of his trade. But his purpose was different. He was not just fixing a machine. He was reforging a symbol. He rewired the pod's small power core, not for propulsion, but for resonance. He stripped out the useless navigation computer and replaced it with a series of acoustic modulators, tuning them to the specific frequencies of the Valkyrie archive. He was turning the vessel that had brought Irie to him into a gift he could send back to her, a portable rhythm keeper, a practice instrument that would allow her to hone her skills as the key singer without having to be in the heart chamber. On the final evening, as he was putting the last panel in place, Sarah approached him. She was holding a small, smooth object in her hand. It was a Valkyrie memory crystal, a sliver of polished obsidian that seemed to drink the light. "The archivists found this after we left," she said. Her voice hushed. "It was in a hidden compartment in the High Elder's chambers, a section of the Citadel's memory that has been sealed for almost 30 years. It belonged to a human who lived among us, long ago." She held it out to him. "The archivist said it was keyed to a unique human biosignature. Yours." Arden took the crystal. It was cool and smooth in his palm, but he could feel a faint, dormant energy within it, a stored memory, a letter in a bottle. He looked at Sarah, a question in his eyes. "I thought you should see it alone," she said softly, and left him in the quiet hum of the docking bay. He sat on the edge of the newly repaired life pod, the ship that had started it all. He held the crystal in his hand and focused, allowing his own unique energy, the frequency of the stone voice, to interface with it. The crystal warmed, and a holographic image flickered to life in the air before him. It was a woman. She was human, with kind, intelligent eyes and dark hair pulled back from a high forehead. She wore a simple Valkyrie scholar's robe over a human-style jumpsuit. She looked tired, but a fierce, loving light burned in her gaze. She was standing in a room that looked like a cross between a laboratory and a Valkyrie temple. A younger version of the High Elder stood behind her, his expression somber. The woman smiled, a sad, gentle smile that Arden felt he had known his entire life. "Hello, Arden," she said, her voice a warm, clear alto. She spoke perfect standard, but with the precise, musical cadence of someone fluent in Valkyrie. "If you are seeing this, then the worst has happened, and also the best. It means the archive was in peril, and it means you were there to save it. My son, my brave, wonderful son." Arden's breath caught in his throat. The world seemed to tilt on its axis. "My name is Maeve Hale," the woman continued, her eyes looking directly at him, as if she could see him across the gulf of 30 years. "I am an acoustic linguist. Your father and I came to the Citadel decades ago. We were a part of a cultural exchange, a forgotten footnote in the history of the Accord. I was studying the Resonant Archive, trying to understand how a civilization could store its entire history in a song. The image flickered, showing glimpses of her work, complex charts of sonic frequencies, holographic models of the Great Crystal, her sitting with Valkyrie priests, deep in conversation. "I discovered a terrible secret," she said, her voice growing grim. "The archive was vulnerable. The early architects of the conquered Bureau of Stability, the predecessors of men like Rourke, saw it not as a wonder, but as a threat, a collective memory they could not control. They were already developing a weapon to silence it, the seed of what would become the Null Choir. They wanted to erase the Valkyrie's song from the universe." She looked down for a moment, gathering her strength. "I could not let that happen. Working with the elders, we devised a defense, a failsafe. We could not shield the archive from the outside, so we built a key to restart it from the inside. The prophecy of the key singer and the stone voice? It was not a prophecy. Arden, it was a blueprint, a rescue protocol I designed." The camera of the memory crystal zoomed in on a schematic she held in her hand. It was a complex diagram of energy flows and resonance patterns. Arden stared at it, his heart pounding. The patterns were an exact match for the golden script on his own skin. The key singer, the royal heir, had the melody, Maeve explained. But the archive needed a grounding rhythm, a counter-frequency so strong, so rooted in a different biology, that the choir's silence could not erase it. It needed a human heartbeat, but not just any human. The imprinting process, the transfer of the rhythm, would be traumatic. The subject would have to endure a shock equivalent to 18 mortal wounds. She looked at him again, and now he could see the tears glistening in her eyes. But there was a catalyst, a moral component. The protocol would only activate. The archive would only imprint itself if the human subject willingly and selflessly chose to endure that pain to protect the key singer. It couldn't be a soldier following orders or a zealot seeking martyrdom. It had to be an act of pure, uncalculated love, an act of grace, a choice only a truly good person would make. The pieces of his life slammed into place with the force of a physical blow. The right of the wall, the 18 stabs. It was not a coincidence. It was a lock, and his choice had been the key. "The Bureau found out about my work," Maeve said, her voice choked with sorrow. "They came for me. They wanted my research, my protocols. They wanted to turn my rescue plan into their weapon. We had to send you away. You were just a little boy. We had to hide you, to protect you from them. We gave you to a trusted family, and we allowed your memory of us to be wiped. It was the cruelest thing I have ever done. We erased ourselves from your life, so you could have one." He was not an orphan. He was a secret. "I knew they would never stop hunting Erie's family," she continued. "So I left one last instruction with the High Elder. If the time ever came, if the choir was ever unleashed, they were to send the key singer to the one place I knew you would be, the place I set up for you, an anonymous workshop on a forgotten station, a place for a boy who always loved to fix broken things. I did not know if the protocol would work. I did not know what kind of man you would become. I could only have faith. I could not choose for you, Arden. I could only trust that my son, the boy I loved, would make the right choice when no one was watching. Not because of destiny, but because of who you are." The recording ended. The hologram faded, leaving Arden alone in the silence of the docking bay, the memory crystal clutched in his hand. He did not move for a long, long time. He was not a pawn of fate. He was the fulfillment of his mother's hope. She had not planned his life. She had trusted his character. The weight of that love, that faith across a void of 30 years, was heavier and more profound than any prophecy. He finally understood. The wardens had knelt not because of some ancient superstition, but because they had recognized the patterns on his skin. They were not the marks of a god. They were the signature of the human woman who had helped save them once before. They were his mother's signature. He stood up, his movements slow and deliberate. He picked up the heavy impact hammer from his toolkit, its weight familiar and solid. He was still a mechanic. He still fixed broken things. But now he understood the nature of the machine. He found Sarah on the bridge of the stray cord. He did not need to tell her. She saw it in his eyes. They returned to the citadel one last time. In the Hall of Echoes, the High Council and the wardens were assembled. They saw him arrive, holding the hammer in one hand. Eerie ran to him, and he took her hand in his other. The wardens, led by Jor, fell to one knee before him. Sarah, standing beside them, did the same. It was not a gesture of fealty to a lord. It was a vow of companionship to a man they finally, completely, understood. Arden looked at the kneeling warriors, at the woman who had promised to guard his journey, and he smiled. "Stand up," he said, his voice quiet but echoing with a newfound authority. "There's work to do." They rose, a silent question in their eyes. "My mother built a key," he said. "Rourke and the CBS just tried to use it to lock the door. But there are other doors, other songs that have been silenced, other communities that need to be heard." He looked from face to face, his gaze steady. "I am not a king. I do not need a throne, and you do not need to kneel. A person doesn't need a throne to have a voice. He just needs a steady rhythm to hold on to, and people to stand with him." He squeezed Irie's hand on one side. He felt Sarah's presence, solid and unwavering, on the other. He hefted the hammer in his hand, his tool, his symbol. He was the uncrowned keeper, the traveling mechanic of the song. His work was just beginning.